After leaving me and our kids for his online hot girlfriend, my husband disappeared for 8 years. Now he's back, claiming he has an offer for me, a 40-year-old female. I am feeling conflicted about a recent decision I made regarding my family and would like to know everyone's opinion to start with. My life turned upside down 8 years ago when my husband Robert suddenly announced that he was leaving me and the kids. He had met a hot chick online and fallen in love with her. His decision came out of nowhere and left me devastated. Robert had been acting distant and strange for weeks leading up to the revelation, but I had brushed it off as work-related stress. We had been married for over a decade and had stuck by each other through thick and thin. I had known him for half my life, and we had built a family together. The possibility of infidelity had never crossed my mind. One evening, Robert finally confessed that he had met someone. Those words broke my heart. He blurted out that the woman's name was Isabella, and she was the hottest woman he had ever seen. He had been talking to her for the past 3 months, and they had formed a connection that made him realize he was unhappy in our marriage. Every word he spoke cut through me like a knife, and I felt a mixture of anger and despair swirling in my stomach. He continued to reassure me that he still loved us, but he couldn't deny his feelings for Isabella. He insisted that he needed to meet her in person to see if it was going to go somewhere. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions, unable to make sense of what was happening, and it felt like the walls of our home were closing in on me. My voice quivered as I asked him if he was leaving us and the children for this woman. He nodded, slowly saying that although he didn't expect me to understand, he needed to do this for himself. He had given it a lot of thought, and he was going to meet her and start a new life. He told me that he was ready to support us financially as much as he could, but he needed to follow his heart and meet the love of his life. The world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe that my husband was leaving me and our kids for someone he had never met in person. My first instinct was to scream, to plead, to do anything to make him stay. But I looked at his face, and I knew that he had already made his choice, and there was no turning back. Robert moved out the following week, leaving me to explain to our children that their father wouldn't be coming back. Emily, at 9 years old, had 1,000 questions, but I had no answers. Nathan, who was only 4 years old then, couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of the situation and clung to me as if he knew that something was terribly wrong. I felt numb and shattered during this time, and my children were the only thing that kept me from drowning in my sorrow. When I first told my family about Robert, they had the same reaction as me. They just couldn't understand why on earth my husband of so many years would do something like this. My parents wanted me to pursue this legally, but at that point in my life, I didn't have a lot to go on, and I still believed my husband would come back to us. Robert's parents looked utterly helpless and broken. When they found out their son had left us, they called him multiple times, pleading with him to return to us, but he told them the same story. Eventually, days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I was left to pick up the pieces both for my sake and for the kids. Our family and friends rallied around us, offering support and a shoulder to lean on. I focused on finding a job so I could provide a stable environment for Emily and Nathan. But the pain of my husband's betrayal lingered during this time. Robert's parents helped me a lot by offering help financially and babysitting the children if I ever needed a break. 8 years have since passed, and Robert's presence in our lives has dwindled to nothing more than a distant memory. He used to send us money periodically, but other than that, he never contacted me or the children. I have pretty much become a single mother over the years, working tirelessly to provide for my children and give them the love and attention they deserve. Although Emily occasionally remembered her father, she eventually stopped trying to contact him and learned not to bring him up. In contrast, Nathan's recollection was far hazier, so he never even mentioned him. They both have grown up to become remarkable individuals despite the pain of losing their father. Recently, Robert's father passed away unexpectedly, and we all attended his funeral later. His family lawyer informed us that he wanted to talk to me regarding his will. The lawyer explained that Robert's father had left some money for his grandchildren. While it wasn't a substantial amount, it could grow. To my surprise, it was Robert on the other end of the line. There was a rush of conflicting emotions, and I was speechless to hear his voice. After 8 years, he hesitated before telling me that he wanted to meet me urgently. I was confused, so I asked him to clarify. He admitted that he wanted to discuss an offer with me and kept pleading with me that he had to see me. I couldn't understand why he was calling me now. After so many years, when he didn't bother contacting me before, his repeated pleas were difficult to ignore. So I took a moment to gather my thoughts and finally agreed to meet with him alone. Albeit cautiously, the rendezvous was set, and we decided to meet at a cafe near my office. As I hung up the call, a whirlwind of questions and uncertainties filled my mind, leaving me anxious about meeting him. After 6 years, I decided not to tell my kids anything until after I met him to see what the offer was that he kept talking about. The days leading up to our scheduled meeting were a roller coaster of emotions. I couldn't help but replay the past in my mind, recalling the pain of Robert's sudden departure, the struggles of raising our children alone, and the years of trying to come to terms with his abandonment. On the day of our meeting, I arrived early, nervously sipping my coffee as I waited for Robert. It wasn't long before he walked in, approaching me with a mix of hesitation and determination. I noticed he looked older, worn, and somehow different from the man I had married. Our initial exchange was filled with awkward silences and tentative words. We avoided the elephant in the room, focusing instead on polite greetings and catching up on the years that had passed. It was as if we were two strangers trying to navigate the remnants of a past life. Eventually, Robert gathered his courage and began to explain the reason for his sudden reappearance in our lives. He spoke about how Isabella didn't turn out to be the woman he thought she was. It turns out she was actually a single mother herself, but had never revealed the truth to him until he had left us and was standing in front of her doorstep. Their relationship faced numerous challenges, mainly stemming from her gambling addiction, which led her to squander all of his money. They argued frequently, but Robert had chosen to stand by her, hesitant to give up on someone else again. However, when his father passed away recently, he realized how short life was to remain in an unhappy situation. Every day he spoke about how much he missed everyone back here and was disappointed with the choices he had made 8 years ago. Robert continued, saying he had thought several times over the years of coming back to us, but didn't have the strength to face us. He then revealed that his father had bequeathed him their lake house, which was this huge property where we used to go for vacations. Before Robert left us, he told me he wanted to sell the house, which would allow him to be set for the rest of his life. I nodded quietly, listening to him. Robert then dropped a bombshell. He proposed that he wanted to come back to us and give our children a luxurious life. He assured me that I would never have to work again in my life if I accepted him back into our lives. I stared at him in disbelief, as he assured me we could live the rest of our lives without worrying about money. Basically, Robert wanted us to reconcile and give our family a second chance, using the inheritance to build a better life together. I weighed Robert's words carefully, understanding the potential benefits that the inheritance could bring to our family. However, it was impossible to forget all the years he had been absent, leaving me to fend for our children. As much as the idea of financial security appealed to me, I couldn't ignore the pain and anger that had built up over the years of his abandonment. So I firmly told him that while I appreciated the offer, I just couldn't forget the last 8 years. I told him that I had been raising the kids alone while juggling work, and while we may not have everything now, we did have a stable life. I told him that I couldn't risk putting myself and my children through the pain. Again, I wanted to protect them, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him not to leave us again. Robert kept pleading with me to reconsider, his eyes filled with desperation. But I knew that if I allowed him back into our lives, I would be taking a huge gamble on our family's stability. My heart ached a bit at the thought of rejecting his offer, especially considering the financial relief it could bring. But I couldn't overlook the emotional scars he had left behind. Since my meeting with Robert, my parents have been asking me to reconsider my decision to reject his offer. They keep telling me that, after what he has put us through, the least he could do now was provide me and our children with a better life, free from financial worries and difficulties. After 8 years of absence, I've been questioning my own judgment, torn between the potential benefits of accepting Robert's offer and the memories of our painful past. So Reddit, am I the bad guy for rejecting Robert's offer and possibly keeping my children and me from a better life? In just a few days, I received thousands of comments and messages from people. I am glad that a majority of you don't think I'm the villain. I listened to everyone's advice and decided it was time to have an open conversation with my children about Robert. The last thing I wanted was for him to reappear in their lives, taking them by surprise. Suddenly, today, I sat Emily and Nathan down after dinner so I could gently broach the subject with them. I began to tell them about their father's unexpected reappearance and his offer to come back into our lives. Their faces reflected a mix of curiosity and confusion as they tried to understand what I was saying when I told them that he had inherited the lake house and wanted to sell it to help us financially. Their reactions varied. Emily, now 17 years old, exhibited a range of emotions from anger to shock. She was as confused as I was and couldn't understand why Robert wanted to return to us after so many years. Although she remembered her father and sometimes missed him, she also remembered the pain she had felt in his absence. She said that she had missed having a father figure in her life initially, but had eventually learned to live without him and did not want him anymore. Nathan, who was now 12 years old, told us that he didn't remember Robert at all, so he didn't care much that I had rejected the offer. He struggled to grasp the full implications of this situation. I told them frankly that whatever they decided would happen, as I respected their opinions and emotions. Emily expressed that she had absolutely no desire to meet him, and Nathan agreed, saying that he was content with how things were. I realized that although the thought of potentially mending our family was enticing, the scars from the past ran deep, and my children's well-being was paramount in my mind. I knew I had made the right choice to walk away from Robert that day in the cafe. Following this, I planned on talking to my parents about the next course of action. Contrary to popular opinion, I never planned on staying married to Robert, but he left before we could go through with a divorce. I did not have the resources to go against him then, but I have since realized that there is no point in staying married to this man anymore. Robert's relentless calls had become increasingly desperate over the past few weeks, and no matter how much I explained to him that I did not want him back, he kept calling. As a non-confrontational person, I felt cornered and emotionally drained by his constant attempts to reach me. I was worried that he might suddenly turn up at my workplace or visit the kids at school. Hence, I decided it was time to reach out to his mother. She was aware of his return and seemed like the only person who could help me understand his motivations and deal with his relentless pursuit. I met her to inform her of my decision to end things with him legally and to express my annoyance with his constant calls. It was during this conversation that his mother revealed the real reason behind his persistence. She explained that Robert's father had added a cleverly designed clause when bequeathing him the lake house. He could become the owner of the house if and only if he returned to our family. To solidify his claim over the house, I had to sign the papers as well. This revelation left me shocked and dismayed. I finally understood why he had been pursuing me for several weeks. The primary reason he was contacting me was not out of a genuine desire to reconcile or make amends with me, but rather to secure ownership of the house. The whole situation felt like a cruel manipulation of emotions, and I needed to consider my next steps carefully. After discovering Robert's true intentions, I realized it was time to act. I didn't want to stay in a relationship anymore, driven by manipulation and secrets. I have started looking for a lawyer who can help me prepare for my divorce proceedings. Immediately, I have also talked with my parents, who regret telling me to reconsider his offer. They understand now that he hasn't changed over the years and are supportive of my decision to move forward with the divorce. They regret telling me to ever listen to him and now know that it is the right thing to walk away from him. I have blocked Robert for now, so he can't disturb me anymore. I plan to see him directly when I serve him with divorce papers. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I can finally give a happy update. As I had mentioned, I was going to serve Robert with the divorce papers, so I reached out to him under the pretext of meeting him. He immediately agreed. Emily and Nathan expressed a desire to youth. While Nathan clung to my side awkwardly, I started by telling him that I knew by now his real motive behind contacting us. After so long, Robert protested that it wasn't just the clause in his father's will. That prompted him, but he genuinely wanted us to give him a second chance. I shook my head in disbelief, knowing that I could not trust another word out of this man's mouth. I told him that we were finished and that the least he could do was give our children some closure by answering their questions. He nodded solemnly. Emily started by asking him if leaving us for another woman was worth it. Robert shamefully looked down as he answered that he was lost, and had made a terrible mistake. Nathan, with a more straightforward approach, asked him if finding his happiness was more important than leaving his children with his wife. Robert took a deep breath before responding that he thought he wasn't thinking straight at the time and admitted that he was wrong in leaving us. My children, perceptive and strong, weren't satisfied with just those answers. Robert tried to justify his affair, saying that it was his midlife crisis. As the conversation continued, Robert shared painful details of his life with Isabella, the struggles they faced, and the realization that he had been chasing an illusion. Emily and Nathan listened attentively, although I doubt they believed him. They asked him why he had never kept in touch and if he really regretted leaving us. I could feel the pain in my children's voices. Robert admitted that he had been overwhelmed by his own guilt and didn't know how to face the consequences of his actions. He reiterated that he wanted us to be whole again, and that he could provide us with a luxurious life. Now, as I looked into my children's eyes, I knew that the decision was clear. They did not believe him, just like me, and would not allow Robert to waltz back into our lives, offering money as a quick fix for the damage he had caused. It was a matter of principle, of standing up for the strength and resilience my children and I had shown over the past 8 years in his absence. Determined, I told him that we had moved on from him and did not need him or his money anymore. I served him the divorce papers. As he looked at it with a mixture of remorse and disappointment, he pleaded with me that he genuinely wanted to make up for those years. But I was resolute in my decision. He then offered to split the lake house sale, proceeding with me, telling me that in this way we could both benefit from it. Emily spoke up that we didn't need his charity money, and Nathan nodded in agreement, adding that we had what we needed to be happy at this point. I guess Robert finally realized what a huge blunder he had made and started to cry. He kept apologizing to the kids, saying he had made a terrible mistake by leaving us, and that he understood that we could never forgive him that day. As I walked away from the park hand in hand with Emily and Nathan, I finally felt free. It had never occurred to me the burden I had carried quietly for the sake of my children. It felt good watching my children stand up for me and have my back. Our divorce will proceed as I have decided. I know that it's going to take a while before I am freed of him legally, but in the meantime, I plan on taking some time off so I can spend some time with my children. I plan on taking them to Disneyland, a trip we have been looking forward to for a long time. I want to create beautiful memories with my children, filled with laughter and joy to help offset the painful memories of the past. I know, as long as we have each other, we can face whatever the future holds with strength and resilience. Despite the challenges and emotional turmoil we have faced, my children and I are on a path towards healing and creating a new, stable, and honest life. This chapter is far from over, but we are going to be writing our own story from now on, and I am determined to ensure it's one filled with love, trust, and growth. Since my last update, I have some exciting news to share. I was promoted at work, and it feels like a huge accomplishment. It took me a long time to reach this position, but I am finally earning a comfortable income that allows me to provide even more for my family. The promotion not only brings financial security, but also the satisfaction of knowing that my hard work and dedication have paid off. In the end, things are going well with the divorce proceedings. I have hired an excellent lawyer who, after finding out the history between my husband and me, is confident that it will be a smooth divorce. Although it may not be a simple process, it is necessary for our closure and a fresh start. My family and friends have stood by my side throughout this time, providing support. Now that I am earning more than enough, I plan on sending my children to Mocom. My son, Nathan, has always had a natural talent for soccer, and we spend our weekends attending his games and cheering him on. I am proud to see my children thriving in their lives. Regarding Robert, we have not been in contact, and I believe it is best to keep it that way. As many of you correctly assumed, his affair partner, Isabella, unexpectedly contacted me one day. The message was not an apology, as one might expect, being that she was the other woman, but rather anger and resentment towards me for allegedly taking Robert away from her. She blamed me for their relationship falling apart and accused me of being the reason for his departure. In her messages, Isabella lashed out, calling me names and making hurtful accusations. She questioned my motives and claimed I had manipulated Robert into returning to our family. The messages were aggressive and unsettling, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the intensity of her anger. I couldn't believe that this woman had the audacity to be angry at me when she was the reason behind my family breaking up. 8 years ago, I responded to her, stating that I had no desire to be with Robert and that I was in the process of getting a divorce. I reminded her of the pain and confusion that my family had gone through when Robert left us for her, and told her that she had no right to contact me. I stressed how our lives had been turned upside down all those years ago and how my children had suffered as a result. I made it clear that I never wanted him back, and if she needed to blame someone, then she should blame herself and her gambling addiction. I blocked her after I sent her the message, and hopefully she won't try to contact me further. I don't want her to mess up the peaceful life my children and I have built. As for Robert's mother, I do talk to her sometimes. As she has always been kind to me, she has expressed her regrets about how things have turned out and wants me to do whatever it takes to be happy. Interestingly, his mother also revealed that due to my decision not to reconcile with Robert, the lake house would not be going to him as his father had intended. This revelation was unexpected, although it also felt deserving. This man's selfish decisions had not only shattered our family, but also another, so it was only fitting that he should suffer. It was time to move forward and leave the past behind. I know it's going to be a challenging journey, but the healing process is well underway. My children are growing and thriving, and our future looks brighter with each passing day. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My whole family dropped me and refused to talk to me when they thought I wasn't Dad's son. I grew up in a happy household. My parents loved each other deeply, and they loved my siblings and me even more. They were attentive and caring, and they always put our needs before their own. My relationship with my parents was particularly good. My dad worked long hours to provide for us, but he always made time for us when he could. He would take us on fishing trips, teach us how to play sports, and tell us stories about his own childhood. My mom, on the other hand, was the glue that held our family together. She cooked us delicious meals, helped us with our homework, and made sure that we were always clean and presentable. I loved my parents, and I knew that they loved me too. But my world came crashing down when my parents started fighting. I had always thought of them as the perfect couple. They had been together for as long as I could remember, and they rarely argued. But one day, things changed. It started with small disagreements, but soon the arguments became more frequent and more intense. I tried to ignore them, but they were impossible to ignore. My mom and dad would shout at each other for hours on end, and I could hear every word from my room. One day, I heard my dad admit to having an affair years ago. My mom was livid, and she retaliated by admitting to having an affair of her own. The argument escalated until my dad questioned my paternity. I was stunned. I had never even considered the possibility that he might not be my biological father. My mom was speechless and didn't know what to say. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I could see the guilt and shame on her face. My dad stormed out of the house, and my mom went after him. After that day, everything changed. My siblings took my dad's side and refused to talk to me. They were angry that my parents cheated on each other, but even more so that my mom had cheated on him, and that I might not be his biological son. They treated me with hostility and disdain, and I felt like an outsider in my own family. My siblings and I were caught in the middle of their argument, and it was like a bomb had exploded in our house. My parents were distant and cold, and my siblings were mean and vindictive. I tried to talk to my parents, but they were always busy or distracted. They seemed to be consumed by their problems, and they didn't have time for me anymore. It was like I was invisible to them. As for my siblings, they would avoid me at all costs. They stopped inviting me to their gatherings and stopped talking to me altogether. It was like I didn't exist to them. The rejection was hard to bear, and I didn't know how to cope with it. I felt like I had lost everything: my family, my home, and my identity. I was lost and alone, and I didn't know if I could ever find my way back at first. I tried to reach out to them. I called and texted my siblings hoping to talk to them and sort things out, but they never answered. I tried to call my parents too, but they were always busy or out of the house. I was desperate to talk to someone, anyone who could help me make sense of what was happening. So I went to my mom's house, hoping to talk to her. She decided that some separation was much needed. But when she saw me, she told me to go away. She said that I wasn't welcome there and that I should leave. Her words were like a knife to my heart, and I couldn't believe that my mother would say something like that to me. After that, I spiraled into depression. I didn't know who I was or where I belonged. I felt like a stranger in my skin, and I didn't know how to make it go away. I stopped going to work, stopped hanging out with my friends, and stopped doing the things I loved. I spent most of my days in bed, sleeping, or just staring at the ceiling. I didn't eat much, and I lost a lot of weight. Months turned into a year, and I thought that I would never be able to escape the darkness that had consumed me. I hadn't heard from them in so long. I lived so close to them, but I was still so far away. My siblings and I were usually at my parents' house all the time. I missed them. I had been so consumed with my pain that I hadn't realized how much my friends had been there for me all along. They would call me, check up on me, and invite me out to do things. At first, I didn't want to go. I was content to wallow in my misery, but eventually I started to go out with them. We would go to the movies, grab some food, or just hang out at home. They made me feel like I wasn't alone, and for that, I was grateful. I started to focus on my own well-being, seeking out therapy and support groups to help me cope with the pain of being rejected by my family. My friends were a constant source of support during this time, and I reached out to them more than ever before. At first, I was hesitant to talk about what had happened with my family. I was embarrassed and ashamed. But as time went on, I found that talking about it with my friends helped me process my feelings and move forward. They listened without judgment, offering words of comfort and encouragement. I also found solace in hobbies and activities that brought me joy. I started to play guitar again, something that I had put aside when my depression took hold. I found that playing music helped soothe my soul and provided an outlet for my emotions. As I started to take better care of myself, I noticed a gradual improvement in my mental health. The sadness and despair that had once consumed me began to lift, and I started to think about the future, about my future. My friends were there for me every step of the way, cheering me on and providing a shoulder to lean on when things got tough. They reminded me that I was not alone, and that I had people who loved and cared for me, even if my family didn't. One day, a few years later, out of the blue, my grandpa reached out to me. He said that he had had enough of the way my family had treated me, and he wanted to make things right. He convinced me and my father to do a paternity test, and despite my initial hesitation, I finally agreed. I didn't want to get back into that murky situation again, but I wanted to know the truth. When the results came back positive, my family was flabbergasted. They couldn't believe their mistake. They realized the error of their ways and were remorseful for the pain they had caused me. They knew they had hurt me deeply, and they were desperate to make it right. I remember feeling torn about their sudden change of heart. On the one hand, a part of me was overjoyed that my family wanted to reconcile with me. It was something that I had wanted for so long, and it felt like a dream come true. But on the other hand, they begged me to give them a chance to make things right, and they promised to do whatever it took to earn my forgiveness. I remember feeling overwhelmed by their persistence. It was clear that they were truly sorry for what they had done and that they genuinely wanted to reconnect with me. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were only reaching out to me because they felt guilty. I asked my grandpa how my family had been doing these past 3 years, and he told me that they had gone to therapy and that my parents were back together. Again, it hurt me to hear that they had moved on without me. As if I had never existed, it made me feel left out and unwanted. Despite their plea for forgiveness, I declined to get back in touch with them. I didn't want to reopen old wounds and put myself in a vulnerable position. Again, I didn't want to risk getting hurt all over again. They dropped me, and once they could drop me again, I told them that they could continue without me. Like they had all these years, it would make no difference. I had finally found peace and happiness, and I didn't want to let them take that away from me. Again, I had found a new family in my friends, and they were the ones who had been there for me every step of the way. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.